Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, the leftist lawfare didn't start here. I think it started when the Democrats used the IRS to target Tea Party volunteers for harassment and intimidation in advance of the 2012 presidential election. In the 2016 presidential election, the FBI, the DOJ, and our intelligence agencies used their power to legitimize the lie that had been concocted by the Hillary Clinton campaign that Trump was colluding with the Russians. Despite knowing this was a lie, these agencies used their powers to legitimize it, to authorize spying on the Trump campaign, and to terrorize its supporters. And when this failed, they continued to pursue it, to undermine the Trump administration, question the legitimacy of the election, and shook this country apart for more than 2 years before the lie was finally fully exposed to the public thanks to the Inspector General's reports. Then we have the 2020 presidential election. Hunter Biden's laptop contained emails that clearly documented long-standing influence peddling scheme involving the Biden family, in which millions of dollars were paid. Yet 52 high-ranking intelligence agency officials signed a letter circulated by the Biden campaign calling it Russian disinformation. And although the DOJ had that computer in its possession and knew it was authentic, they suggested otherwise and then used their power to pressure social media companies to censor and suppress that story. Pollsters have reported that action alone could have decisively influenced the 2020 election. And now we have this. And I'm sorry to inform the ranking member, but Jack Smith was one of the principal figures in the IRS scandal. He had a history of prosecutorial misconduct, culminating with unanimous reversal by the U.S. Supreme Court. Yet he was the one appointed by the Biden administration to try to put their chief political opponent in jail. Biden's attorney general personally approved a raid on a former president's home despite strenuous opposition by career DOJ officials and by the local field office that would normally have had jurisdiction. Alvin Bragg, who campaigned by boasting he'd prosecute Donald Trump, was joined by the number 3 official in the Biden Justice Department. Nathan Wade, named prosecutor by his paramour, Atlanta DA, spent 8 hours consulting with the White House counsel at the White House before filing these felony charges, not to mention the multiple failed attempts by Democrats to throw Trump off the ballot. This administration, its Confederates, have broken every political norm, every civil tradition, every due process protection that shielded Americans from the convulsions suffered by banana republics. And we can now clearly see the full power of leftist lawfare. We always thought this couldn't happen here, but it has. And my question is what can be done by Congress, first of all, to close this Pandora's box and assure that it is never opened again? Mr. Bailey?
I think this body has a duty to erect a wall of separation between tech and state to prevent government censorship of conservative voices on big tech social media platforms. As you pointed out, the deep state has actively suppressed information that interfered with the 2020 election. I think that will continue to happen as we move into 2024. And I think the distinguished member is absolutely right that we've got to stop looking at lawfare in terms of trees and start seeing the forest for what it is. It's censorship. It's civil suits. It's President Trump being unconstitutionally stricken from the ballot in states. It's now criminal charges.
It's the turning of the most terrifying powers that government possesses against its own citizens to influence elections. And this has been going on now through several cycles, and now it's getting to a whole new level. Mr. Traynor?
Thank you for the question. I think it really comes down to the fact that we have to get away from allowing government to be the weapon to interfere in political participation.
How do we do that?
I had the opportunity last year to testify before the House Administration Committee on this very issue of how complaints are filed with the Federal Election Commission and used to do nothing but go investigate political opponents under the guise of the federal government conducting a legitimate investigation, and they ultimately turn out to be nothing at all. In fact, the most infamous one that I talked about was a gentleman who spent $348 on a Facebook page. The allegation against him was that he had spent $23,000 on a Facebook page, and he spent 3.5 years being investigated.
Right, and word gets out to anybody else. Don't even go near the political process because you will expose yourself to this kind of liability. I know Tea Party volunteers who today won't go near politics for fear of invoking the harassment of the IRS. What really frightens me is It's what happens to our country when Trump, if Trump narrowly loses the election and the case is then overturned and repudiated and exposed by the higher courts. That could tear our country apart. Ms. Foley, final word?
Well, I mean, I think there are a few things that at a minimum should be done. One is to defund the district attorneys and actors who engage in these nefarious acts. Two, I think the Congress needs to use its oversight authority. It has clear oversight authority under the Civil Rights Act to make sure that law is not weaponized to prevent people from exercising their First Amendment freedoms and other constitutional rights. And I think that's really a pattern that's going on today. I think there's mass intimidation through lawfare and other means to intimidate, especially those on the right, from speaking their mind, from gathering, from assembling, from protesting. I think also we're, to a certain extent, we're late to the game as conservatives and Republicans, but we have to start engaging in lawfare of our own. I think there's various ways, for example, that Mr. Trump, if he wants to.
Well, my time is up, but I hope we don't do that. We must never allow the left to become our teachers.
Well, but there's good lawfare and there's